All right, so for nearly 80 years, the most explosive truth in human history has been hidden in plain sight. Not by accident, but by design. Tonight on Truth Be Told, we go beyond UFO headlines and sci-fi speculations to ask the real question no one wants to answer. When does secrecy become criminal? Well, today our legendary guest, Daniel Sheehan, isn't a theorist. He's a constitutional attorney who has spent decades inside the legal, intelligence, and congressional system. And what he reveals reframes the entire disclosure conversation. This isn't just about extraterrestrials. It's about power, accountability, and whether a shadow state has been operating behind the Constitution itself. From secret legislation and black budgets to whistleblowers, recovered craft, and looming legal showdowns between Congress and intelligent communities, this episode exposes what really is at stake and why disclosure may no longer be an option. If you think UFO disclosure is just curiosity, this is Congress versus the shadow state, and the truth is finally pushing back. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios, congressional attorney Daniel Sheehan. Well, look who is back on Truth Be Told. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing fine. Very busy, as you might guess.
Why? I don't understand what.
Yeah.
I thought you were retired and not going on the beach in Hawaii.
No, I've been at this for a long time. It turns out that there's an entire extraterrestrial civilization all around us that we've sort of just discovered, and therefore we're busy trying to get people to understand the implications of all of this, get Congress to come to grips with it, and get Congress to compel the executive branch to tell them what they've known about this for the last 80 years.
Well, let me ask you about that, because most people, when we say UFO disclosure, everybody thinks of the sci-fi, but you're approaching this a little differently, more of a criminal investigation. And why is that?
Well, they're both things that we have. On the one hand, a major 58-page piece of legislation just ordering the executive branch people to turn over the information to Congress and to get Congress to appoint a 12-person, this one is the commission, basically a review board to review all of the information and to declassify all the information that the Congress wants declassified to give to the people about what's going on, and to enable the Congress to start passing legislation, amending some of the major institutions and treaty relations we have with other countries, et cetera, to deal with all of this. That's on the one hand. That's sort of the carrot, saying, here, look, here, you can do it. We can all cooperate. We can all get along and get this done. On the other hand, there has to be some stick involved here, and that's the preparation of the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act criminal complaint, which we will first lodge with the Justice Department itself, to see if the Justice Department, even though it's an executive branch agency, will be willing to deploy against the other, for example, Central Intelligence Agency and some of the military intelligence operations, to force them to comply with the law. And if they don't, if the Justice Department isn't willing to do that, then we're capable of initiating that in the judicial branch. To get the courts to intervene, to have a civil litigation compelling the disclosure of this information to Congress. So that's, we've got both the carrot and the stick operating right now. And in that context, we're in regular communication with the people, not only in the Congress, but inside the Justice Department, attempting to get this done. But the bottom line is we have to be in communication with our people, with our citizens, because as Eric Burleson, Congressman Burleson, who has basically the portfolio on the UFO issue in the House Oversight Committee, said just on January 20th at a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. He said, look, that unless the people rise up and demand that this be done, the Congress people have got 100 other things that they're doing. They're having to deal with Minneapolis. They're having to deal with, Greenland. They're having to deal with Venezuela. They have to deal with the tariffs. They've got tons of things that they're engaged with, and to get them to put a high enough priority on this issue of getting disclosure made, at least to the key committees in Congress, by the executive branch, they're going to be tied up doing all kinds of other things. So that the same way with our people. Our people are all tied up, doing other things, taking care of their children, going to work, trying to deal with the Super Bowl.
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that keep the citizens busy doing other things. So what we have to do is get our citizens first to make a very high priority of getting this done. And then they need to demand that the Congress people do their job. There's an election coming up in November. And so we at the New Paradigm Institute, in addition to working on the statute and working on the criminal indictment, we're working on mobilizing the people and getting people educated about this. And that's what we're engaged in. That's why it's like a full-time job. We have to get up early in the morning and work till late at night, working with the people. But we find that people all across the political spectrum are extremely interested in finding out about this, because they've suspected for decades that the UFOs are real. They've suspected for decades that the government is hiding something. They've got X-File programs about it, and they've got every other kind of. There's always this deep conspiracy going on the part of the government keeping this information from us, and it turns out it's true. And now we've got some insiders. As recently as November 21st, we've got the Age of Disclosure, this major 90-minute documentary film with some 34 people that have above top secret clearances, telling our people that this is real, and that we're in possession of, not only in possession of a number of these UFO non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, but that in fact we're in possession of bodies that have been recovered from the crashes, and very importantly, in the Age of Disclosure, Dr. Eric Davis, who's one of the principal engineers involved in the attempt to reverse engineer the technology from these craft, that he has told us that he had a direct conversation with President George Bush Sr., who told him that back in 1964 at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, a UFO landed on the tarmac and met with high-level Air Force officials and civilians, apparently from the Central Intelligence Agency, and that they went into a hangar and had direct telepathic communications with each other. So this is extraordinary information to be available for the people now. Our job, your job, all of our jobs are to share this with the people, and that's what we're doing.
Well, you've said this secrecy goes clear back to Roswell in 1947, and it is fascinating how such a program survives 8 decades, like you said, multiple administrations, bipartisan oversight without exposure. And at what point does this? Because they always say it's a national security thing. Well, when does it finally cross the line into unconstitutional governance? Because it seems like everything they don't want us to know, they just use the national security phrase.
It's like waving the bloody shirt.
Right.
But they've been doing it since December of 1947. They passed the National Security Act when they created the Central Intelligence Agency.
Right.
And then later on, in February of 1948, the National Security Council, that had been created by the National Security Act, issued an executive order authorizing the Central Intelligence Agency to engage in covert operations. And then it was Johnny bar the door, from that point on. So we've been dealing with the much more general problem of the rise of this national security state here in the United States. And they have basically adopted, and we now know from the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document, we know that they view their mission to be to establish full spectrum military dominance over the planet. The United States military. That's their mission statement in the intelligence community. And they've stated right in the second iteration of that document that the purpose of that domination is to secure and to maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials of the planet, for our major industries, basically our basic corporations. So I mean, you can say, like in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, you can say, well, Billy, that's a mighty fine ambition,
Right.
but I mean, it causes a lot of problems. And what they're doing, the key to this thing to understand is that this national security state infrastructure wants to reverse engineer the technology that they can secure from shooting down the UFOs and getting their technology so they can make weapons out of it, to promote and increase their ability to establish full military dominance over the planet. And we find ourselves as the 5% of the population of the entire planet as United States citizens that can do anything about this. And that one of the things that we need to do is first force them to disclose this information to Congress. And if the people in Congress don't stand up and exercise their authority to do this, indeed to fulfill their responsibility constitutionally to do this, then we have to replace them.
Right.
And that's what the elections are about.
Right.
So the New Paradigm Institute is going to be handing out these pledge cards to all of the candidates for all 435 of the congressional seats and the 33 Senate seats that are up for election here in November, and say, here, you sign the pledge card agreeing that you're going to support full disclosure, at least to Congress, of what it is that or we'll vote for somebody else, who will do it. And we have an opportunity here. I mean, the only time people turn their attention to these things usually is when there's getting set to be an election.
Right.
So we have it. We're in an election year now. And, a little more than 38% of the people vote in the off presidential election years. So we're in an off year. But we have to increase the percentage of people from 38% to get it over 50% at least of the people voting here. And then when the presidential election comes in 2028, we have to get everybody out to vote on this, because we need to have a president and an administration that is going to do this. Okay, and the Congress has to order them to do it. And what they don't understand is that the Congress is basically the government of the United States. They're the elected leaders. 99.99% of all the people in the executive branch aren't elected at all.
Right. Right.
It's just the president. And his or her job is to do what Congress tells them to do. And the Congress has sort of forgotten that under the aegis of this new national security state since 1947. Somehow, the national security state is the government. And the Congress is doing their bidding.
Yeah.
And they'll only ask for as much information as the executive branch is willing to give them. Which isn't a lot. And so that's the job of the New Paradigm Institute. That's my job as the president and the general counsel, to help the Congress, identify the legislation that they need to pass, to let the Justice Department know what the violations of criminal law are that are being committed, perjury to Congress, embezzlement of hundreds of billions of dollars from other appropriated funds from the Defense Department into this secret program, the kidnapping of people, who they think are psychic, that can help them figure out how to pilot these craft, because they've discovered that it turns out the UFO craft are piloted and navigated telepathically. And while they're, amazed at all of that, they at least know enough to try to get people who are psychic to help figure out how to pilot these things.
Right.
So this is an extraordinarily interesting field, as you might guess, as you well know. So it's exciting. You get up every single morning going, oh, this is really interesting stuff. If you're going to practice law, you might as well practice law trying to get the Constitution enforced,
Right.
And find out how to notify our people that there's a non-human, intelligent, highly technologically developed civilization all around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it ought to be important to people. And people are trying to figure out, well, how's that going to, lower the price of hamburgers, or, how's it going to help me, fill my gas tank, to go to work in the morning. That's part of our job as the New Paradigm Institute to explain that. Why is this important to you? What are the potential implications, of this, rather than just being either told you're mentally ill because you think it's going on, or, that you're going to be criminally punished if you try to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So this is the job of the New Paradigm Institute. We've organized people now in 35 of the states.
That's amazing.
Into Citizens for Disclosure.
That's amazing.
Just last night, I was on a podcast with the people at the Edgar Cayce Institute down in Virginia. And we had Citizens for Disclosure there.
Yeah.
They were handing out literature and stuff, and we were getting people to join the Citizens for Disclosure, to go to the New Paradigm, go to newparadigminstitute.org, and become a member of the New Paradigm Institute and become a citizen for disclosure. That's what we're doing. It's activist work, but it's legal work. It's social ministry work, if you will.
Yeah.
It's ministering to our society and to our whole human family, to try to figure out how we can get past this threat of nuclear war, that we have created hanging over ourselves on the planet. How we can stop the destruction of our global economic and environmental system. This is a major strategic task that our citizens have in front of us. So that's what our New Paradigm Institute is doing.
And we thank you for that, because a lot of us honestly don't know a lot what's going on. We hear what we listen to on podcast or on, television, on History Channel, or, but that's like an hour and then we forget about it. It's like going to church. I dress up 1 hour a week, go to church and try to be my best. But the rest of the week, I have my problems. I cuss, I drink, and, all that stuff. And sometimes I feel like the government is like the current Anunnakis. I feel like we're the workers. They're the ones that try to get us to mine for their minerals or whatever resources they need, right, so they can, stay in power. And
we have to be careful of becoming too extreme in our sort of condemnation of the people that are involved in doing this. That is by their own lights. They're doing the best they can.
Right.
But, but as Winston Churchill said about Neville Chamberlain, his lights were none too bright, and therefore his best was none too good.
Right.
And that's what we're experiencing now. And so the levels of confidence in the Congress that are at an all-time low, the levels of confidence in the government itself are at an all-time low. The reliability of the judicial branch is at an all-time low. These institutions are not succeeding in earning the respect and the confidence of the people, and therefore our people, we the people, have to rise up, and remedy this. And what we want to do at the New Paradigm Institute, we want to do all of this within the constitutional structures and democratic processes that we have available to us. Not to, get into the streets and start setting things on fire,
right.
Surrounding the White House, with torches and pitchforks. What we want to do is exercise our constitutional responsibilities through the constitutional processes, but we need to educate ourselves. And that's our job, is to help educate people who don't have the time in their daily schedule to pay full attention to this. That's our job. That's why we have the Conscious Life Expo. We have these expositions, like periodically during the course of the year. We have Contact in the Desert. We have the Conscious Life Expo. We have, the New Living Expo. We have all these gatherings, and the next one on the agenda is the Conscious Life Expo that we're going to be doing.
Which you're going to be at.
Yeah, and I've been invited to do a 90-minute presentation to the plenary. This is, it's going to be from February 20th to February 23rd. It's going to be down at the LAX
Always there.
Hilton down in Los Angeles. People should come to this. And I have the presentation that I'm going to be doing, the 90-minute presentation to the whole plenary. But then I've been asked to do a 2.5 hour in-depth discussion with the
Wow.
people there. I'll have those two events. I'm on a panel of other people that are involved in this UFO issue. But those two major presentations I'm going to do, the first one, the 90-minute one, is going to be addressing the statute that we've been engaged in working on with the House Oversight Committee. What does that look like? What is it Congress can do? What is it that we're asking them to do? And what does the criminal complaint look like? That we're asking the Justice Department to deploy. And that'll be the first 90 minutes of that. In telling people about the Citizens for Disclosure and how to become members and all that. And then in the 2.5 hour sort of intensive, we're going to be talking about what are the implications of all this. What is it exactly that we know already? What have we been told in the age of disclosure of these 34 people that have come out and started telling us some of the inside secrets now? So what is it we know so far? And what are the full implications of this? From a point of view of our geopolitical structures and our treaty relationships with among our nation states. What are the economic impacts of this? What are the philosophical implications of all this? What is the import for our sense of physics of the actual physical material reality that we live in? And then of course there's the theological questions. What are the theological questions here? While we dress up and go to church or synagogue or the temple, once a week, we're not being told about this stuff.
No,
At
all.
We're being told things like, we believe in the Holy Spirit,
Right.
and the resurrection of the body and life everlasting. But nobody gets told about what that means. There's a bonding phenomenon that bonds every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe into one unified harmonic whole. And that there's the actual evolution of a faculty of the spirit that human beings have, by means of which we're able to directly and immediately experientially engage this unitive phenomenon, just like seeing a light and hearing sound. And this is a secret that the churches and synagogues and temples know about, but they have not yet effectively communicated this information to the people. That they've just set up institutions that sort of demand not only their money, but their kind of loyalty, and then say, we'll do the job for you.
Right.
But you're not involved in this. You just come in once a week, and listen to us read from scriptures, which are still comparatively opaque to most of the people. But now there's an opening here. Because all of these spiritual truths that are being conveyed to us by the different religious denominations, etc., it turns out, lo and behold, they're true. And that there's some sort of scientific, physical, metaphysical explanation for what it is that's going on here. And we're being confronted with that now here in this particular age, because we're encountering people from a civilization, some of the members of which are 6 billion years more advanced than we are. I mean, we now know that we've got the James Webb telescope up, searching for the perimeters, the boundaries of our physical universe, the sum total of the mass and energy that make up our physical universe. And the question is now starting to occur to us: what's outside of all that?
Right.
What's outside of the sum total of all the mass and energy, since we know there's got some kind of a boundary to it? Is there or is there not some infinite and eternal and completely undifferentiated sea of consciousness, that somehow has enfolded into being the material universe? Are the ultimately irreducible energy of matter in our universe, the quarks and neutrinos and the muons and leptons, are these or are these not simply condensed units of consciousness? that have actually been undertaken by the infinite and eternal, the ultimately ineffable. That what is all this about? Those are profound theological questions, and the point is, all of our philosophical questions and answers derive from the answers we provide to those theological questions.
Wow.
And so this is I started working on this at Jesuit headquarters.
Wow.
I was there from 1975 to 1985. I was there for 10 years at the Jesuit headquarters. It's the largest single denomination or order in the entire largest denomination, religious denomination in Western civilization. And that's where we started working on this, trying to figure out, is it time to tell the people?
Right.
Our position was that it is time to tell the people. The Jesuit order was created back in 1547 to reform the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church wasn't functioning effectively.
Yeah.
It wasn't doing its job to be able to convey to the people what these kind of metaphysical truths were, and what the moral and philosophical and theological implications are. That's what's happening now. That's what's happening now. In your show addresses these things. That the churches and the secular community has designated all of this stuff as kind of paranormal.
Right.
That it's somehow occult stuff, and they've actually the institutions have tried to associate that with evil and demonic power. In order to sustain their own unique authority.
But
So
don't you
this
think?
is a very
But don't you think you're seeing a huge decline in people, not necessarily leaving their spirituality or their belief, but they're leaving the churches because they're tired of being judged. They're tired of being, not, I hate to say it this way, preached to and just lied to.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
No, the people realize that the churches and synagogues and temples and stuff have come to a point now where the levels of education of the people and the levels of consciousness of the people have transcended the institutional teachings of these religious institutions. That are 2,000, 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jewish and Hindu faiths and the Buddhist faiths are older. The Christian tradition is 2,000 years old. And they designed the institutional churches designed the teachings for people 99.9% of whom were completely illiterate. In fact, were completely uneducated and never went farther than 50 miles away from the place where they were born.
Right.
So they the people who had some insights into the kind of subtle dimensions of metaphysics, did, as I said, the best they could at the time by their own best lights, but those lights are none too bright, and their best is none too good anymore. So we have to have a kind of radical evolution of our institutions, our religious institutions, our political institutions, our economic institutions, and certainly our military institutions. We have to back away from this lust to self-destruction, that we're engaged in here. Yeah. So this is and people were becoming optimistic, throughout the 60s.
Right.
They were saying, "Oh, good, it's kind of an age of Aquarius.
Right.
People's consciousness are all rising. People are refusing to go and fight in the Vietnam War. We're rising up. We're pitching politicians like Richard Nixon out into the street. But the forces of reaction have set in. They're digging in, and that they're trying to re-insist upon our abiding and obeying the institutions. Because they're freaking out that those that are in charge of the institutions, economic institutions especially, are afraid of losing control.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the fact is, most people are inclined to cling to a sinking ship, and they will not swim out into the unknown sea unless they can see another ship to go to. So the New Paradigm Institute is, at the same time we're demanding disclosure, we are in the process of trying to construct a safe landing place for everybody. What are the new amendments that need to be made to our economic institutions? What are the new amendments that need to be made to our geopolitical relationships? It's clear that the United Nations is not succeeding right now. It's still rooted in verifying and reifying the nation states. And the nation states is a political structure that was organized from the Treaty of Westphalia, back in the 1530s, by the royal families, to divvy up the territory and still be able to compete with each other, but to try to set up some kind of system of rules and regulations pursuant to which the royal families inside each of these nation states could diplomatically deal with each other instead of going to war.
Yeah.
But how's that working?
Not well.
Not too well. So we have to amend these. But the fact is that people aren't motivated to amend these things until such time as we believe we have to.
Right.
And once we realize that there's an entire extraterrestrial civilization around us that is vastly more technologically developed and vastly older in the time that they've spent looking into these metaphysical questions, the time is upon us as a human species to get our act together.
Yeah.
To get our act together. If we're going to merit, citizenship in this larger galactic civilization, we're going to have to overcome some of these more primitive belief systems, but we're going to have other belief systems to which to migrate. And that's the job of the New Paradigm Institute, is to try to figure out where we need to get to in order to open up the gates to the rest of the galaxy and our own people, because our people are not going to be allowed out into the galaxy bringing nuclear weapons with us. That's not going to happen. And they're showing that by the UFOs appearing over our nuclear missile sites and shutting the missile sites off. They've descended over our aircraft carriers and shut them down completely, out in the middle of the ocean, all power, all propulsion gone, all electricity gone, all lights and communication capabilities. This is actually happening right now. Okay. As I've got to check it out today, but I just got a note this morning that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have once again amended the doomsday clock.
I saw that, the closest we've ever been, I think, right?
The closest ever. That is closer than when we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis,
which is scary,
back in 1962,
yeah.
Where we came to within 2 minutes of having a total thermonuclear destruction.
I think we're at 80 seconds, right?
Pardon?
I think we're at 80 seconds. Is that right?
Yes, they're at 80. So they're down to 79 seconds, I think now. And I mean, so we're approaching the 1 minute to midnight here. And so that we're getting a huge increase in the appearance of the UFOs. We're getting an increased occurrence of them hovering around our military facilities and our nuclear power facilities, et cetera, trying to warn us. In fact, we have hundreds of stories of individual people who have encountered UFOs and the beings on them, and they repeatedly tell us that the UFO beings are saying over and over again to them, please tell your people that you've got to get rid of these nuclear weapons. You've got to disassemble them and get rid of these things. And you've got to stop polluting your planet. You've got to stop, pouring, poison chemicals into your rivers, poisoning your oceans. We've got almost 100 nuclear power plants that are all along the seacoasts of our world.
Yeah.
And we've already seen at Fukushima, that when the tides go up and there's a big storm now, and they flood the nuclear power plant, that they end up pouring radioactive materials into the oceans.
Yeah.
We've got fish 15 times bigger than they've ever been before, all around the nuclear plant, with 5 eyes. Come on. We've got to be able to communicate effectively to our people, not terrifying them, not frightening them, but to really understand that the institutions that we have created over the past 2,000 years, have played out their role. Okay, but it's time now to amend them.
Yeah.
And since the people aren't going to let go of the sinking ship until they see another ship available, it's our job as responsible citizens to start laying out what the new alternatives are. But what's stimulating the need to do this is the appearance of the extraterrestrial beings. That they're appearing and they're contacting people. They're landing in people's fields, bringing them on board. Telepathically communicating to them the need to go out and tell people to get rid of these nuclear weapons. Now the response of the national security state is, well, number one, that isn't happening.
Right.
Anybody who thinks that is mentally ill. But thirdly, they say, see, they're trying to disarm us. They're getting set to invade us. They want us to get rid of our nuclear weapons because that'll protect us. And because they live in a completely binary, dialectical world. They have a second paradigm worldview that is completely Hegelian. There's for every single thesis pertaining to reality, they have an antithesis. And that they struggle with each other in this bipolar way. And here we are coming on now to, we're going to have tens of millions of people watching the Super Bowl.
Right.
And it's the red team versus the blue team, and they're chasing a pigskin up and down the field,
Right.
and slamming into each other, and then hauling off people, injured parties off to the sidelines into the blue tent,
And we celebrate it.
And then the other people, when they get done watching the Super Bowl, they go and watch cage fighting. We've got to transcend this type of consciousness.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't have entertainment. It doesn't mean that you can't have, healthy sports activities. But what it means is it's becoming pathological.
Yeah.
When you have people, men and women now, getting put into a cage, locked into a cage and beating each other senseless, not just scoring points, but having to beat the other person senseless until they give up, or are completely unconscious. This is a serious problem. Okay?
I never
and so
understood
all
that.
of this is relevant.
Yeah, I never understood that. It's like you were talking about polluting the water. If I would go in and I would put poison in my family's food, I would go to jail for life. If I went out and beat somebody up to break their bones, and I would go
steal their lunch money,
or steal their lunch money, I'd go to jail, for a long time. It is funny when I hear people talk about, they're going to come and destroy us. I'm like, why didn't they do that 200 years ago when we had musket guns?
Yes.
And we had no technology, but we don't even come close to the technology they had. They can destroy us anytime they wanted to. So I never understood that part of it.
No, it's just rooted in fear.
Yeah.
Tony. I mean, if you appeal to people's second chakra and stimulate their second chakra into this kind of dialectical fear orientation, it's very easy to do.
Yeah.
That's why I try to be careful, not to just list out all of these terrible things that are going on that can frighten people. This is an extraordinary positive opportunity that we have here.
I'm ready.
To reach out to the stars, to get to understand some of the information that this civilization has ascertained with billions of years longer to have been directing their conscious attention to the answer to some of these profound questions, the origins of the universe. What is the ultimate destiny of our universe? We see our universe, experience our universe expanding, out and out and out, in the 118 elements of our periodic table, all disintegrating and decaying at their rate of atomic breakdown. We see this process. What does this mean? Does this mean that our universe is going to ultimately dissipate and just expand into nothingness? Or if in fact, is there going to be a point that's going to be reached where the impetus that is engineing the expansion of our universe, the Big Bang, is that going to expire at some point? And as our material universe disintegrates, and every ultimately irreducible integer of matter stands separate and apart from every other, is there going to be enough bonding attraction to have them collapse back in upon each other, upon the expiration of the pressure driving our universe outwards? These are profound fundamental questions having to do with the teleology of our universe, and of course its origins. These are questions that not coincidentally are being raised deep inside the national security state right now, as they realize that there's this extraterrestrial civilization coming that are in possession of information that so vastly transcends our present state of information and knowledge that they can't even comprehend it. I remember when I guess it was back in 1970 or so. I'm sitting with a couple of my friends in New York, right? And one of them is a computer specialist, works for IBM, right? And he's graduated from Dartmouth and Harvard Business School, and he's gone into IBM, and he's a computer specialist. And he's telling myself and one of my other friends, who's a fellow graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, who ends up being the chief assistant attorney general in the state of Washington. I mean, this is when we were younger. And the computer fellow, Joe Zinn, is saying, you guys, he said, that the thing that's happening with computers right now, he said, this is absolutely extraordinary. He said, in another 100 years, they're going to be doing things that you can't even imagine right now. And so my Mac says, like what?
You're like, well, I can't even imagine it.
And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And so the national security state people, unless they can figure this out and get in charge of it and get control over it, they're afraid of it.
Yeah.
And that's what we see happening right now.
Well, before we get out of here, I mean, I remember in the 70s when I was a kid, I was probably 7 or 8, going to Disneyland or Disney World, I can't remember, and going through Tomorrowland and seeing like, oh my gosh, is this what the future holds? Well, we've already passed that.
Yeah, we went past that in 1960.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. I go now and I'm like, boring, but it is funny that what we imagine is not even close to where it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But before we get out of here, and we're going to tell you one more time coming up for the Conscious Life Expo, but you mentioned at least 5 unhuman species.
Yes.
And you said there was a new species. Is that right? Did I hear that at the beginning?
No. The ones we know about, the one that we have the most information about, there's 5 of them.
Okay.
But what I've said is that we have a spectrum of human worldviews, and that there's a new worldview.
Got it.
There is a new worldview, an 8th new post-contact worldview that we have to develop. Because we have the authoritarian worldview, we have the reactionary worldview, we have the conservative worldview, we have the moderate worldview, we have the liberal worldview, we have a progressive worldview, and we even have kind of a utopian worldview. But those don't complete the octave. There's an entire octave of worldviews that our human family has developed. And we are in the process now of having to work out our new 8th paradigm worldview. And it has to be to some extent incremental, from what we already know. But we have to have that be as advanced as we can, and still be able to communicate effectively to our institutions and to persuade them to amend themselves or to amend them. We have the ability here in the United States, at least, to amend our own institutions. We can still do that.
Right.
And there are other countries that have at least an adequate degree of democratic power in their people, in our people, to rise up and to articulate a new alternative set of principles, policies, and programs. That's what we need to do. It's simple citizen work that we need to do. But first, we have to educate everybody to get past the PSYOPs program that has been going on for 80 years. Try to convince everybody that anybody who believes that UFOs are real are actually mentally ill. It was a very concrete, specific, intentional, covert operation on the part of the operations director to the Central Intelligence Agency. And Richard Dolan has extracted the documents from the intelligence communities. He's published them in his 2-volume work called The UFOs in the National Security State. People should all get a copy of that. It's and read it and give it to your friends. It's a 2-volume work by Richard Dolan called UFOs in the National Security State. And you'll see the documented proof, that shows that there was a conscious program that was deployed by the Central Intelligence Agency, out of its operations directorate, to actually convince people that people who believed that UFOs were real were clinically mentally ill.
Wow.
In fact, any military officer who tried to report an encounter with a UFO, the first thing that happened, he or she was ordered to go get a psychiatric exam, and that was going to go into your file, your military file. And that's a fact, and that's how John Mack at Harvard got involved in this to begin with, is he had these high-level military officials being sent to him, to give them a psychiatric exam.
Yes.
And after he'd done, several of these, he started saying, this is extraordinary. I mean, these people are totally within the normal parameters of normalcy, and yet they insist upon talking about this encounter that they had, and so he started investigating it, and he became convinced that it's true, that this is actually going on. And when he tried to write a paper about it, and he submitted it to the New England Journal of Medicine, actually, and they refused. Not only did they refuse to publish it, they refused to read it.
Really? They didn't even want. They're like, no, I don't want it.
We're not looking. And so the bottom line is that we now are at a juncture in our evolution as a species, where we're evolving into the next phase of our biological evolution. We've evolved from Australopithecus to Homo erectus to Neanderthal. We were now at Homo sapiens, and we're on our way to the next evolutionary step in our consciousness. And as Crane Brinton, the head of the Department of Intellectual History at Harvard, reported in his final lecture back in May of 1968.
Wow.
He actually said that, the greatest he's discovered, he was asked to lecture on the most important intellectual insight that he had encountered as the professor of intellectual history at Harvard. And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, the greatest minds in our human family have all come to realize that we as a human species are evolving into the next stage of our evolution. And that the factor that is going to distinguish the next phase of our evolution from our present one is the evolution of a faculty by means of which we can directly and immediately experientially encounter the bonding phenomenon that bonds every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe into one unified harmonic whole. And by means of this direct experience, like seeing or hearing, that we can intuitively know what human conduct, either individually or collectively, is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of the universe.
Love it.
And that's why so many of you young men here in 1968 refused to go fight in this war in Vietnam.
Right.
So what I'm saying is we need to get back to that age of optimism, the knowledge that we had in the 60s, that we could change things for the better, that we can overcome the kind of lower angels of our human nature, and we can evolve into the next phase of our human evolution. And with it will come our journey to the stars.
Well, I have to say, I know Daniel's not mentally ill. He's just an outstanding young man that has brought the world some great information. And today was just an appetizer. You guys can come to Conscious Life Expo February 20th through 23rd, and he's going to be doing two workshops. One is going to be Saturday, February 21st from 4 to 5:30. Get your tickets now because I have a feeling it's going to be sold out. But then on Monday, 2.5 hours, he's going to be talking the implications of disclosure. And so you guys can ask questions. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very energized discussion.
I love it. And then you can go and look him up on all his website. You can also go to newparadigminstitute.org, and there's his social media. And Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I really appreciate
Terrific.
you.
Thank you, Tony. It's a treat.
Oh, I can't wait to see you at Conscious Life Expo.
I'll see you there.
All right. Take care, everybody. And thank you, Daniel. And make sure you guys subscribe, share, and leave amazing comments for us so we can get our algorithms keep going. Until next time, I'll see you next Friday on Truth Be Told on the Club Paranormal Network.